This is note-taking guide 1.8 for Math 1. Today we're going to solve literal equations. So what does it mean to solve a literal equation? It actually means to take an equation and solve it for a certain variable. The other variables are not going to go away. It's really just rearranging them, getting them so that the one variable you're looking for is on one side all by itself. The rest of them are just kind of hanging out wherever else they can go. So on this first problem right here, it says to solve for x. So my x value is right here. I need to get it completely by itself. How am I going to get it completely by itself? Well, the way I like to do that is I like to kind of just cover up and say, oh, how do I get rid of what's attached to that 4x? Because the 4x is kind of attached right there. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, pretend like that's covered up right there because it needs to be by itself. What do I have to get rid of first? Well, I have to get rid of that plus 16 off the end. So how do I get rid of a plus 16 off the end? Well, I do the opposite to move it to the other side. So the opposite of adding 16 would be subtracting 16. When I move it to the other side, it doesn't get to combine with the 2y because the 2y has a y. The 16 doesn't have a y. They're not like terms, so I just have to kind of write them front to back like that. Over here, they cancel, and I'm just left with the 4x. So again, if we go back to what I was just saying a minute ago, my goal is to get this x right here by itself. So what do I have to get rid of that's attached to the x? Well, I have to get rid of the 4. How do I get rid of a times by 4? Well, I do the opposite, which is divide by 4. Well, I have to divide everything on the other side by 4 when I do that. So 2 over 4 actually reduces to 1/2. So I have 1/2 y. Negative 16 over 4 will divide out to be negative 4. And over here, 4 divided by 4 divides to be 1, so I just have 1x. Because I now have the x isolated, which was what I was asked to do, solve for x, I have now solved this literal equation. So what it really is it's just rearranging the equations so that you have the variable that you're looking for on one side by itself. So let's try it again. This time we're solving again for x, which means I need to get x by itself. So again, I like to kind of cover up the thing that it's immediately attached to and say, well, what do I have to get rid of that's attached to that? Well, it's obvious when you do that that the 10 has to go first. So how do I get rid of a plus 10 and move it to the other side of the equal sign? I do its opposite, which would be subtract 10. So over here again, they are not like terms, so I just write them attached together, y minus 10. Over here, I'm just left with that negative 3x. Those 10s cancel each other out, which is why I did it. So then again, you guys, I like to say my goal is to get this x by itself. So what do I have to get rid of that's directly attached to the x? Well, I have to get rid of the negative 3. And how do I get rid of times by a negative 3? Well, I do the opposite, which is divide by a negative 3. I can divide every part of it by negative 3. It's going to cancel over there to just give me the x. Over here, this y divided by negative 3, let's remember that there's one y there, so that would be a negative 1/3 y. And then negative 10 over negative 3 would change to a positive 10 over 3. Now, I always get the question, they're like, Mrs. Clark, couldn't I just leave it as y minus 10 coming from right here? Divided by negative 3 equals x. You could leave it like that, but most of the time, like in order to graph it and stuff, it needs to be left in this form. So I would rather see it written out that way because it's going to help you in your future. All right, this next problem says solve for a. So my goal is to get a all by itself. So here's my a right here. So I'm going to just kind of scribble out what's exactly directly attached to the a, and then it shows me exactly what I got to get rid of first. What do I get rid of first? I have to get rid of a plus d. And how do I get rid of a plus d? Well, I do the opposite of add d, and the opposite of adding d is to subtract d. So I'm going to subtract d to the other side. Over here, I'm still left with ax. All right, so on this side, I have a times x left. On this side, usually I like to write my variables first, so I'm going to have a negative d plus 7. Why did I decide it was plus 7? Because the 7 was positive. So again, I'm still trying to get a by itself, so if I just kind of look at that and I'm like, I need a by itself, and I have to decide what I'm going to move. Well, what am I going to move? I have to move the x. The x is multiplied by the a, so how do I get rid of a multiply by x? I divide by x. Now again, when I divide by x, I have to divide everything by x. It actually cancels over here to just be a. On this side, it just gets ugly, which sometimes they just do. They just get ugly. So on this side, I have the d, the negative d over x, and then I have the 7 over x. So really it got uglier than it started out with, but that's okay. That's just how I solve these kinds of problems. All right, one last problem here. We're solving for k. So again, you guys, I like to just look at this and I like to ask myself, well, what do I need to move that's not directly attached to the k? Well, if I look at what's directly attached right there, it's that top part. So then it's obvious what I have to get rid of first. I have to get rid of that m first. So how do I get rid of a divide by m? Well, I do the opposite of divide by m, which is to multiply by m. So I have to multiply both sides by m. So over here it cancels to just k times L. And over here I get t times m. So we can just smack those together without a sign in between them. If you don't like the way they look like that, you could put parentheses around each of them to imply that multiplication, but they're okay. If there's not a sign in between two variables, we know they're multiplied together. So my goal again is to get that k all by itself. So I need this guy by itself. So I have to get rid of the L. The L is multiplied by the k. So how do I get rid of multiplication? I divide. So I divide both sides by L. So I get k alone on this side is equal to Tm over L. And it doesn't actually simplify any more than that. Again, you could write that as T over L times by M over L. But in this case, it doesn't really work good, and we should probably not do that. So just leave it as one term like this and go from there. Thanks for watching. Good luck with your homework, you guys.